As a black sheep, there's probably something that you are avoiding, something that you have a negative association with. But when you embrace this one thing, when you shake that negative association, your life drastically changes.
Born in 92 on the block with the sharks. Come from a different cloth, y'all would get ripped apart. You want it diamond, then you gotta get it in the dark. We dropping nuggets like Carmelo with the Rucker Park. Now we eating from state to state, we scrape the plate. I put my eggs in a basket, took a leap of faith. I took a chance, now we grow and see the impact. Decoding Success, a special guest, now let's bring Matt.
Welcome to the Decoding Success podcast, top 1% globally ranked podcast. Thanks to you. Want to take a quick moment to express gratitude for you being here, whether you are called to this because of the title or because of the thumbnail, or maybe just because of life and divine guidance. I want to welcome you into this episode and just super excited that you are joining us for a conversation around isolation. As a black sheep, someone that might have felt neglected or rejected or just simply isolated, it is something that we might fear as a recovering black sheep and someone that has experienced all of that. In fact, I often tell the story about growing up. And as you know, holidays are a time for getting together. As a black sheep, it might be the opposite. I remember so vividly so many years of my life where my family would go and get together, and I would actually just stay back home and spend the holiday by myself, oftentimes not eating and just being there, distracted on my phone, maybe playing video games as a kid growing up. Looking back, there is some regret about doing that in full transparency, and I was always invited to be with the family. It was never a moment where I received a message or was told, Matt, you can't come. There was never rejection to that point. And I know that's a sensitive subject for some, and I just want to make sure that I'm being empathetic toward that and just clarifying this. But so many times I remember just the family would go out for Christmas. The family would go out for Christmas Eve. And if it wasn't hosted at my mother's house or my father's house where I lived and the family wasn't coming to me, I deliberately made the choice to stay isolated because to an extent, isolation felt like my norm. And being isolated allowed me to stay in a space where there was acceptance because being around loved ones who didn't do this with any ill will. And this is never a knock. And again, I just put this out there for the sake of telling this story. This is not to shame anyone. This is to teach, right? Because there were many times growing up, whether it be with family or even with some friends or some friend groups, that just feel really different. You feel so damn different. And before you discover that your differences are your strengths, it feels really uncomfortable, especially as a kid. Because as a kid, you want to be accepted. You don't want to feel like, oh shit, like I'm just so different, right? I mean, you don't want to feel isolated in a room full of people because that is one of the worst feelings. Imagine feeling lonely in a room full of people. That is exactly how it feels as a black sheep. But the important thing to discuss with isolation is the reacquaintance with it. Because as a black sheep, we have a negative association with isolation because that's just how oftentimes it's been forced upon us by how we feel. And it's important to reintroduce isolation to your life. It's very easy for a black sheep to be very social because a black sheep that transforms themselves over the course of time realizes and identifies family outside of their bloodline. The black sheep will identify family in their friends, in their colleagues, in their peers, however you want to frame it. And it's very easy for the black sheep to continuously put themselves in the presence of those people. But what we forget is how damn good isolation also is for us. There's a healthy version of isolation where you are at peace versus the isolation growing up that is unintentionally forced upon us, whether it be by ourselves or maybe in a certain situation, your family, your loved ones, whomever. All of that being said, there's that differentiating factor. Now, isolation isn't a prison, it is a path. Oftentimes, it could feel like a prison, right? It's like, hey, I feel like I'm stuck in this state of isolation. But truthfully, isolation isn't a prison, it is a path. Healing isn't lonely, it's liberating. The whole purpose of this episode is exactly that point. It is to reintroduce isolation to the person that stays away from isolating themselves. I can remember so many freaking times the holiday stories. Even beyond that, right? There were times where I would just isolate in my own home growing up, right? When it comes to eating dinner, I would be at the kitchen table and my family would be at the dining room table. I would be in my room with my door closed and the family would be in the living room watching TV. These are real stories of what a black sheep actually has done. And that has a lot of negative energy around it. There might be some just like resentment toward those that may have made that black sheep feel like they need to do that. And when we feel that resentment, we also feel it toward the isolation. So, what I want you to walk away with this episode are a few behaviors here, right? I really want you to think about how you can intentionally begin to microdose isolation. Microdose, I know that's a term that's used with some other stuff. I'm not talking about that other stuff. I'm talking about microdosing isolation because it is an uncomfortable thing to do, especially if you're someone that completely avoids isolating themselves. You don't find it to be peaceful because you're maybe at a phase where you're not comfortable with what's going on between the 6 inches of your ears or between your ears. But we need to at least begin to microdose isolation. And how do you do that? You have to be super intentional about it, right? If you're living with someone, you have to carve out time where you are not with that person. If you are driving or commuting to work, what I would actually suggest is not putting music in, not being on your phone. That's a really great start to microdosing isolation. Of course, you might be commuting on a very busy train or something of the sort, so you're not completely isolated, but we have to be aware of the things that distract us from the isolation as well. So find ways to intentionally microdose moments of alone time by yourself, actually listening to what's going on between the ears. I'm not telling anyone if you are totally uncomfortable with being alone. I am by no means not telling anyone to go on a 6-month silent meditation retreat. Like, we are not going for just jump off the cliff and build a plane on the way down here because that's really uncomfortable. I'm not even telling you to go book a flotation therapy session where you are totally deprived of your senses for an hour upon floating in water. Like, don't even go to that extent. Start by carving out 10 minutes. If you have no problem with 10 minutes, go to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40, whatever it is. But there is an importance of reintroducing a healthy version of isolation, right? When you are by yourself, there is time to reflect. There's time to just quiet the noise. There's time to hear yourself, right? How often do we not listen to ourselves because we're always so busy? We're always with people. We're always working. We're always no, just isolate in a healthy way. So again, behavior number one, microdose isolation. Take those tech timeouts. I used to a few years back, it was super uncomfortable to do this, but it was so beneficial. On Sundays, I would do a tech timeout from the minute I would go to sleep on Saturday morning to about 5 p.m. on Sunday, getting ready for Monday, where I would finally reintroduce myself to my phone, only for a few hours. And I'm talking about the phone specifically. Like, hey, you're probably looking at me, you're like, Matt, on Sundays I watch football, man. It's football season. What are you talking about? Like, yeah, watch your football, do your thing. I don't think football is distracting you as much as social media is. I don't think football is distracting you as much as doom scrolling or constantly engaging in text messages so that you're talking to people and not isolating yourself with deliberate intention in a healthy way. So, walking away from this video, I want to remind you, as a black sheep, as a recovering black sheep, someone that could sit here in this chair, there are times where I do this as well. After work, it's so easy to pick up the phone and just scroll, 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 right? That's not isolation. It's simply not. I'm telling you to deliberately do that. The point of this episode, once again, is to realize that isolation isn't a prison. The prison that you once thought isolation was, it isn't that. Isolation is a path. The path is to healing, and healing itself is liberating. On that note, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode. I'm really grateful that you joined us for this. I hope that you are around for more episodes. In fact, let me not hope, I'm going to prompt you to make sure that you are smashing that subscribe button. If you are tuned in on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You got numerous videos coming at you per week. And maybe you're on the flip side of this. Maybe you're catching this on the go. You got us on Apple, you got us on Spotify, you got us on Castbox, or wherever you're listening to this from. Make sure you click subscribe there as well. And then, hey, if you want to do the flip flop, you want to catch us on the go, or you want to watch us on YouTube, you can check out the show notes of this episode where you will find a direct link. I want to make things super, super easy for you. Just in one click, you will be directed there. And again, you want to make sure that you're hitting that subscribe button so you never miss a beat. Until next time, everyone, be blessed. Peace.